We'll just bring the panelists up and then
we'll
get started right away. But we have Miko, Britt, Alexis, and Terrence, and they'll introduce themselves in just a little bit, but we'll go ahead and get started.
All right.
So as Brett was mentioning, one of the things when I saw the name of the panel, Blockchain 2020, I kind of tended to think, oh, very futuristic, and then I realized that's like a year and a half away. So in order to start, I think we should just go around and look back as to when we first discovered what blockchain really was, and what was that industry or what was that light bulb that lit up that you thought this technology would revolutionize, and where is that now that we're close to 2020?
How long do we each have?
You'll just have a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll get straight into some of the nitty gritty. Cool. Okay.
So I'm Terrence Yang. I'm a small angel in San Francisco at Unbank.Ventures. I tweet a lot on Bitcoin Twitter, not non-Bitcoin Twitter. Anyway, so I got into crypto in about 2014. I was first introduced to it in 2012 when Coinbase pitched a YC demo day. Didn't remember their pitch at all. Had multiple chances to invest through like Funders Club as a small, kind of indirect angel or LP, and just screwed that up pretty badly. In 2014, I kind of realized that, wow, this is a lot like what I used to do on Wall Street. So on Wall Street, I was a securities lawyer and worked on a lot of new financial products. And we often had problems with ledgers between different banks not reconciling, or between us and clients that maybe weren't as sophisticated, but their back office might not be as sophisticated, but they did a lot of trade with us. So I realized that ledger tech could be something that could be possibly very useful. And that's how I got into it. Started mentoring at Plug and Play in Sunnyvale in their first fintech and Bitcoin accelerator, and did a couple investments there, and just kind of got into it in 2014.
Good. Miko?
Yeah, I'll be concise. I've been here in Silicon Valley 30 years. It's my 50th birthday today. And
happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And I've been working on open source software the whole time, right? And so open source money rolled along, and I was like, holy shit. So, that's all, I pushed in, and that's all I do now. I don't really collect fiat anymore.
Well, today would be a bad day for the past few days.
No, it's been great. I think I'm old enough to have survived the dot-com boom, and if you count the number of super unicorns that were built at the peak, at the valley, the depth of the valley, like the biggest crash creates the biggest giant companies and the biggest investment opportunities. So it's super awesome. It's good times.
Great. Britt?
So I'm building one of those awesome companies. I'm Britt Morgan. I'm the co-founder of Hilo. Realized that blockchain is going to disrupt many different industries, and found myself needing and wanting to get into it, and decided to build the thing that hopefully will create mass adoption. So was able to buy Bitcoin back in 2012, sold it way too early, kind of forgot about Bitcoin. And it wasn't until Ethereum started creating all these new ICOs and different investments that I really got interested in it as an investor. And then recognizing that the technology could disrupt many different industries, kind of fell down that rabbit hole. I'm sure everyone in this room fell down. So that's me. Go ahead.
Great.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Alexander. I'm a wealth management advisor by trade. Manage a little bit less than $300 million of traditional assets. Got in Bitcoin professionally in 2016. Got interested very much in the blockchain in general. Now I'm actively working as a president and co-founder of a Token IQ, which does a platform of securitizing, tokenizing securities and asset-backed investment contracts.
Great. Alexander, you mentioned Bitcoin, and that's basically how I found out about the technology way back, probably around the same time. The promise for me by now, it was, hey, this technology, we're going to be able to transact anywhere. I'll go to a coffee shop, buy anything. But really, I have not even used a single Bitcoin anywhere, right? Even though I'd like to. So Britt mentioned that you're interested in mass adoption. So I want to pose the question, is it a mass adoption issue or is it a technology issue as to why we're not there yet?
So I think it depends on how you look at it. If you look at the different assets and how we're trading them, that there's definitely an issue with how people can get into those different assets. It's like a stock market 2.0. And then when you're looking at the technology and we're talking about protocol layers that are going to disrupt different things, I think we're just not at scale, and we all know that. So we're kind of at this weird gray area where we're trying to figure out how to bring new people in, but how to do it in a way that's scalable.
Miko, would you agree that it's more of the technology side?
Well, I'm an LP. I invest with Pantera, and Pantera ICO fund is tilting their focus towards infrastructure. So it's basically like, okay, let's get some performance chains together. Let's get the space meshes, the sellers. Like, let's get these kind of nouveau, the cadenas. Let's get these nouveau infrastructure chains up and running. Because until we get that done, it's going to be hard to really run any apps on this thing. So I think that's a mindset. To me, I actually feel like people looking for the Netscape moment. I think we have to have it, but I think what's going to precede that is mass institutional adoption, which I think is going to drive further investment into the space. And to some extent, we're already seeing it. It may be somewhat invisible, but if you actually look at the number of venture funds that are pushing capital into this space, that's actually fiat that has yet to come into crypto, right? And right now, all we're seeing crypto exiting the fiat through ICO.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned technology is kind of like in the back end. And Terrence, I know you have a lot of Wall Street experience. What is happening now that maybe the typical consumer doesn't see in the back that this technology is actually being implemented?
So I'll just be frank. We've had a big crash in crypto. And a lot of that is rational, and a lot of that might be irrational. I think it's mostly rational because we have no adoption. We have a lot of blockchains, a lot of coins. I don't know what they do. They don't work. So we have Bitcoin, which kind of works because it's uncensorable, unseizable, and immutable. You can't change it, can't stop it, and can't take it away, right? Except for the on-ramps and off-ramps are kind of weak. So when you go from fiat, meaning like US dollars or Venezuelan bolivars or whatever, to Bitcoin, people can stop you. The government can stop you. In China, they have strict capital controls. The economy is not doing well. China nationals should be buying Bitcoin. It is a $15 trillion economy, GDP. How come they're not buying Bitcoin and other shitcoins or whatever to drive up the market, right? Venezuela, 1,000,000% a year in inflation. We have Turkish lira imploding, Iran. Do you guys know how many Bitcoins are sold on local Bitcoin in Venezuela? I asked this question to a Bitcoin OG or Baron who owned at one point more than 2% of all the Bitcoin in the world. How many Bitcoins, I asked him, are being bought and sold right now in a day in Venezuela on localbitcoins.com? He guessed 10,000. The actual number is less than 100. It's not being used. So if Bitcoin's not being used and nobody's using these speculative coins, nothing's clearly working. The UX is horrible. We have Bitcoin, which has been not suffered a major attack since 2013. So Bitcoin's stable from catastrophic bugs, but even Bitcoin Cash, just recently, it was revealed that a Bitcoin Core developer helped Bitcoin Cash. So Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash compete with each other. There is a fork. Some people think Bitcoin Cash is an altcoin. But there was a catastrophic bug that a Bitcoin Core developer who's just going through the GitHub and saw this huge refactor, they noticed that Bitcoin Cash, their number one most popular core, number one implementation on Bitcoin Cash had this huge bug that was refactoring a large amount of code reviewed by 2 people and submit it in a week. That is a disaster. So a lot of this stuff just doesn't work yet.
Good.
Come back to Bitcoin.
Miko, do you tend to agree with, hey, Bitcoin is powerful, hey,
Yeah,
no
so
one's using it?
my thesis is that if you look at the power law distribution, that you should expect Bitcoin dominance to be at 50%, right? I think there was this phase where it's at 38%. Today it's 58%, right? If you actually look at Bitcoin to fiat volume, one of the really interesting statistics is that in Japan fluctuates in 24-hour volume between 77% and like 60% of the total fiat to Bitcoin volume on the planet. Right, and that's actually institutional. So to me, the thing that's really intriguing is what is the role of Bitcoin? And I think ultimately it isn't about Bitcoin. It's about the dominant open source currency, right? Which to me should be metastable at 50% of the total value of the asset class. But that's really just my mathematical conjecture. But it could be false.
You mentioned Japan, if I could expand a little bit on that.
For sure.
Japan was the first country to say, hey, these
Legalize Bitcoin, yeah.
currencies.
It's a bit of a formality.
Yeah.
To me, the thing that happened with Japan is they hosted Mt. Gox, which is disaster, right? And then the next thing that happened is the regulators were like, we love Bitcoin, and they started like licensing exchanges. And then what happened was CoinCheck, right? The largest theft in human history, I think it is. And so all of a sudden, the FSA in Japan, the regulator in Japan, is apoplectic, right? And the thing that, if you see a row of like Japanese, typically it's men bowing, like that's a game over type of a news story, right? And so to me, what's happening is the pendulum is swinging back towards tightening regulations because you just, you can't do stuff like that. That doesn't work. And to me, I blame centralized exchange. I blame custodial exchange. I think it's a completely broken pattern, and we should just stop being idiots.
Alexander, now that we mentioned a little bit about just tokens in general and governments cracking down with regulations, I know that with Tokens IQ, you deal with a lot of that. Is the US having enough regulations, not enough regulations compared to Japan? If you know a little bit about that, what's going on?
Well, it's a very good question. So obviously, the securities law has been around since 1930s. So the adoption of those securities and transferring it into the tokens, there's a question whether the behavior of this token should be directly correlated to what the securities should do, or we attempt as a cryptocurrency communities do completely different. So to me, dealing with some of the issuers that come to Token IQ, specifically wanting tokenize their securities, the first question is, are your legal docs in a row? What kind of offering you would like to do? And only then and after then we can build the infrastructure as well as the smarts of these tokens to behave exactly the way the legal documents state. So specifically, very quickly on the overall cryptocurrency crash and Bitcoin in particular. So there is a study's been done recently by National Bureau of Economical Research. I think two gentlemen, Mr. Liu and Stevensky. They have seen a very direct correlation of a 1 to 2 week patterns of behavior of a Bitcoin to how the tweets as well as the Google search and anything to do with the social media behaves. So, which it's a great sentiment. So it seems like that the tactical patterns of a Bitcoin seems like behaving almost exactly how the social media are behaving in terms of the posts. So, and that's been kind of just posted recently.
And I think you might be an expert with this, seeing that you've built a social platform around trading.
Yeah, so you're right. Like this is it's a naive space. It's completely speculative, and sentiment drives the market. So, yeah, there are new ways to kind of analyze that, and my platform will be one of them. I don't want to plug in to be an ad here, but
yeah, I think just to very quickly add to it. So the expiration of futures also directly has to do with the price drop of a Bitcoin. It also tend to be that 6 days after the expiration of a futures, the price of a Bitcoin goes up. So, and that, unfortunately, I guess in the original thought of a Satoshi, it's never been the case of having the futures. Whether it's a good thing to have the futures or not, time will show. But at least for now, there's a direct correlation of expiration of the futures on the price drop of a Bitcoin.
Miko, do you think it needs more regulation right now with all these ICOs popping up and everybody?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, like ICO is kind of a crazy bloodbath. You know, I think to me, in order for us to get to any form of bright future, like the industry needs to kind of grow the hell up. You know, I feel like one of the biggest things that is a battle is just establishing proper governance within the space of use of proceeds. So to me, like the VCs got it right, which is the VCs put in 3-member boards, and it's typically 2 insiders and new money, you know, and that works, right? Because if the founder goes nuts, then the co-founder is like, you're nuts. Go away, right? It's that simple, right? So if it's 2 insiders and new money, like you're good. So it's that simple, and we're not doing it, right? And you know, embarrassingly enough, you know, among the 14 advisory, you know, deals that I participated in, you know, 15% of them have had governance issues. So like, it's not, you know, and I mea culpa, right? I'm focused on governance topics, and you know, we're suffering from them. The industry's suffering from them. So
what do we need to do to actually get it to a level where it's?
I think the investors just need to demand it. The investors in this space are too kind of like ETH throwing speculator people. So like they're not sophisticated enough to demand it. But I think that gatekeeping signal investors, like venture class investors, who are now starting to dominate, by the way, should just demand it. They should just be like, yeah, we're not investing in this BS. We're just gonna, we'll just pass. We'll pass until you give us a structure that we can actually understand.
Well, and talking about venture capital, I think I read somewhere where it was like $6 billion invested through venture capital, and right now through ICOs in like the last few months, or I don't remember the statistic, but it was also $6 billion, right? So there's this new influx of money from different people. Do you think that's healthy, Terrence?
It can be. I'm pretty pragmatic. I'm wearing a Berkshire Hathaway shirt. I want stuff that works. So I don't care how much money is invested in ICOs or VCs. People need to use your currency or platform, protocol, whatever it is. I meet founders who routinely say things like, oh, we don't need to worry about product market fit or meeting unmet needs because we're just going to do a protocol, and the protocol members, that's their job. It's like, well, why would a protocol member that you're trying to recruit join unless you have something compelling? You have to have something compelling that's uniquely valuable. If you're not meeting unmet needs, pack up your bags and go home, or just buy Bitcoin, because you're just wasting your time and your investors' money. You have to build something that's actually useful that other people can't meet. So your coin, your product, or whatever has to meet unmet needs. Otherwise, no one's going to pay for it and no one's going to demand it. It's not a useful product, service, or platform. You're just wasting time. That's my belief.
And we see it all the time with young, I guess, entrepreneurs.
Not just young.
Yeah, I guess everyone. Talking about value, you know, what are some of the products outside of cryptocurrency that are being used? Like this technology is actually impacting these products, and that there's actual value that you've seen, or perhaps that some of the things that you've seen where it's like, no, we don't need this right now, where founders just throw in the blockchain term in there.
Okay, so I'm a believer, along with Luke Dash Jr. and Cobra on Bitcoin Twitter, that Bitmain, which I ended up investing in a fund that invested in Bitmain. Bitmain is a monopoly on hardware and also mining, and they can do a 51% attack or attack Bitcoin if they wanted to. It'd be kind of suicidal to break the thing that gives them a lot of profits, but they could do it if they wanted to. So we should have a proof of work change. So people working on proof of work ideas that are new, using kind of marrying I can't talk specifically because it's not kind of confident, but if you kind of look at some areas that are doing things that could be used in proof of work that could result in a more efficient way to achieve consensus and avoid double spends, right? And
So you like Bitmain?
I like Bitmain because I respect Bitmain. I don't like Bitmain. I respect Bitmain
Okay.
because they're a legal monopoly.
I only said that so we could go
sure.
faster.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
Miko, are you on board with Bitmain? Like this whole thing of, hey, we're going to decentralize this,
So
but it turns out
here's
it's centralized.
my mood, which is that what I ask entrepreneurs is, I get that you're headed for heaven and you're going to have the rapture, but what are you going to eat every day until you get there? And the crappier the answer, the happier I get. And a lot of the crappy answers have to do with picks and shovels, which is, we're going to sell crypto to people who are doing crypto because we're crypto guys. I like exchanges, so I like people. But to me, when you say, oh, we're a protocol, like there's nothing to sell. So you have a problem, right? If you're a protocol of a killer application and the application actually sells, if it sells to people that are doing crypto, even better. Because those are the people that actually have wallets that will actually give you crypto for doing crypto. So I like crypto to crypto stuff. Because it allows you to continue to eat, right? Because if you can't extend your runway, we don't know how long the bear market will last, and if you're unable to extend your runway, good luck.
Britt, I know that we talked a little bit outside of, hey, times like this where crypto's so low and everybody's scared affects platforms like yours. Any thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Look at the room. Like, where is everyone? I think it's when times are good and the price is going up, the room's full. And when we're in a time like this, the room's how it is now, it's empty. So the same goes for companies like mine, where our target audience are the people in this room or the lack of the people in this room. It's hard, but entrepreneurs are resilient, or the ones that succeed are, and you don't let the bad times kind of damper the mood, and you look at the future. And right now we're building the thing in hopes and with the vision that this technology and these assets will be the way forward. And
these are the awesomest times, though. These are the best times, right? This is great. This is awesome. Like, think about all these idiots that stayed home because Ether's not paying them to be here. It's great, right? Like, the people in the room are the best people.
Yeah, so
Y'all
we
are the
get to
best
hang out with
people.
you guys.
That's awesome, right? It's like, oh, I'm only gonna show up if I get free money. Like, who the hell are they?
And Miko's gonna give you all free money. So.
Yeah, that's
It's his birthday.
Those people can take a hike. Anyhow.
Well, Alexander, aside from cryptocurrencies, let's try to gear away from that. The promise was, hey, this awesome ledger in the cloud is going to run like supply chain logistics, and it's going to do this for healthcare. But I haven't seen any of these products actually used by anyone. What do you think the reason is? Like, any thoughts on that?
The blockchain is a technology here to stay. That's the fact. The adoption of the blockchain by institutional players is rapidly growing. Why don't we see the actual use cases? That's a good question. There are actually use cases out there that use the actual blockchain to utilize it, what it's supposed to do. If we look at the actual product of what a lot of speculators essentially attempt to do by issuing these ICOs and things of that nature, I think that for sure will go away. Maybe to approach your question a little bit differently, even though the mainstream consumers not necessarily witness the actual application of the blockchain technology, but on an institutional level, there are many use cases at this point.
Mm-hmm. Miko, any that you've seen?
So my big thing about so-called enterprise blockchain and kind of blockchain but not Bitcoin is that it often is pretty misguided. I actually think blockchain is similar in mindset to open source technologies, and it took open source technologies 30 years to become pavement, right, for everything, right? So now like there's no proprietary software company that doesn't use mostly open source, right? So to me, like, yeah, it's so similar to that. I think blockchain is a scorched earth mindset, right? Which is you give away power in order to get users, right?
But how do you monetize, sorry to interrupt, but how do you monetize open source?
The way you monetize it is you kind of don't. You basically just like scorch the earth, and it means the disruptor ends up winning by basically commoditizing the market and getting less margin, right? So to me, that's that. But the thing that if you actually inject the cryptocurrency, then all of a sudden you actually have incentivization. So if you do blockchain without crypto, then you have no incentives for anyone to do anything, and it just goes back to being open source, and it takes 30 years, but it paves everything. So it's going to pave everything. Blockchain will pave everything, but it'll take 30 years. The thing that will happen with disruption is crypto. The cryptocurrency produces incentives for decentralization, right? Which is, to me, the question, someone asked me like, hey, should we do an ICO? And I was like, that's a really bad question. The good question is, should you incentivize people who add value to your ecosystem? That's the question you should ask, right? And if you ask that question, like, are you going to be like, no, we shouldn't. We should just ignore those people and, no, because you must, because someone else is going to. Someone else is going to show up with a coin and say, use our network and we'll pay you. And they'll all go there. So the point is those are the new table stakes. And that's what's disruptive. That'll take less than 30 years.
You were going to disagree with something there.
Fight.
I'm trying to disagree with them. It's hard to do. But, having the tokenization to like incentivize behavior within an ecosystem, meaning like a company or platform or whatever it is compelling. It's really interesting. It's something I'm interested in building. But so it's hard for me to disagree, but also like, how do you sustain that, right? If there's all this regulation that are saying these incentivize tokens in this platform or in this project or a security, right? And these people own them, aren't accredited, they shouldn't legally be able to have them. How do we move forward with that? And I think that's kind of getting in the way with building those models.
I think it is, but ultimately, like the internet routes around damage, and censorship is perceived as damage. And so, we're just going to incorporate in Malta, and we'll just go into Europe, and we'll just, it's going to route, US investors will invest out of Cayman. So it's all routing around the
True, there's loopholes, and then we're all using them. But I mean, when we look at like a company, like for instance, like my company, we're a US corp, right? And let's say everyone in this room decides to use it, and I give them tokens. Like, didn't I just commit?
Yeah, you can't do that.
Okay. But that's what I'm saying. Like, how do we can't really create momentum if we have these roadblocks? And I think that's a huge flaw in like the way that we're designing things and the way that our tokens will be used. And it's no fault to ours. It's just how the regulation is panning out. But because if I go and I have a Cayman entity and a Malta, it doesn't matter. Like I'm still like there's still a US-based audience and a Chinese-based audience.
But the reality is that only dictatorships can prevent mass migration of people using things that serve them better, right? So in the long kind of arc of history, like domicile competition should help, and we should be able to route around suppression, right? So my point is that like we're going to win, right? The only thing that governs the speed at which we win is whether we ship stuff that people really want to use. And if we can't ship stuff people want to use, then like we should lose. And
Well, Terrence mentioned Venezuela earlier. Now that you're talking about dictators, how do we get that to actually, help the people? How do we get the people of Venezuela, for example, to actually use the technology?
I love Terrence's earlier point, which is that like it's really terrible because people don't really find it usable. Like people aren't like, oh wow, this isn't the solution for them. Right? So we need to fix that. Like that's probably the biggest thing.
How do you fix that?
I hate to say it, but more education and just more people going to Venezuela who care about helping these people, because there's a lot of fraud right now where other coins are being sold to Venezuelans, and they're buying them because they're cheaper, the fees are lower, and they get scammed, the coins get lost. It's very hard to use Bitcoin, right, to run a full node and own a hard wallet and have cold storage. It's just really hard, even for people in major economies who study Bitcoin. It's just really hard. So Venezuelans, you can't really expect them to do it. But it is the way to, Bitcoin is the way to get your money out of the country, even if it's as a capital flight conduit where you convert Bolivar to Bitcoin to US dollars. You don't have to stay in Bitcoin, but.
I'm actually from Venezuela.
Oh, great. Yes. Yeah. So please give us your insights.
No, it's sad to see. Okay. It's sad to see that people are actually dying, and that the government is persecuting people that have actually like mining rigs because the energy is so cheap. And that comes to the concept of government. And you mentioned Malta just a little bit, but that's more of the loopholes that we have. We could probably end with one last question in terms of governments. What is the role of government to get to the future that you saw, cryptocurrencies and blockchain being? What is the role of government?
So my view is I'm an open source nerd, and so picking a domicile is like picking a database. It's like, should I use Postgres or should I use Oracle or should I use, I don't want to use Oracle. Like Oracle costs $1 zillion. Like why don't I use MySQL, right? So it's, to me, that's the same process that you use to pick a domicile. It's like, oh, should we use Malta? Oh, Malta's giving us all these incentives. Oh, the prime minister's coming to shake my hand. Okay, awesome, let's go to Malta, right? So like, to me, domicile competition is going to drive the theme, right? Because they want our business. Yeah. And the other guys that don't want our business are like, get the hell out of here, you're a scam. Okay, we got the signal, bye.
So people or governments essentially will be competing.
They have to compete.
For people.
They have to compete, because otherwise.
What if they have a consensus, like a worldwide consensus that would allow anyone to operate within the jurisdictions of any country, and the rules will be the same?
I'll tell you one thing that will be universal, which is KYC AML. That will be the one thing that all governments can agree.
Because I think it's natural.
Except North Korea, Iran, like except OFAC countries, which they'll be like, oh shoot. But everyone else will agree on AML.
All right, I think I got the time. Let's open it up for a few questions from the crowd. Hopefully we didn't scare you too much. I think at the end of the day, the technology is there to stay, like Alexander said before. But it's how do we fix these issues that we have now? So I'd like to open it up for questions for any of the panelists. Yeah. Do we have a microphone, or just
shout.
Scream it out?
Just shout it out.
Yeah, it's fine.
Go for it.
Yeah, sorry. So there was a talk about the use case of the product. It's just like if we were looking at Ethereum, what's the use case of the Ethereum today? We're yet to see a use case at a large scale, except from like CryptoKitties and actually raising funds to ICOs. So from a VC perspective, what is your time horizon? Because like if we look at Ethereum, it's been 1.5 years plus 2 years, and nothing's coming out in terms of product usability. So is this key criteria that you mentioned is it so important, or maybe it's just that maybe I'm not getting the time horizon that you're thinking of in terms of VC investment?
So, go ahead.
So I'm a small angel, I'm not a VC, but my time horizon is forever, so I hodl or hold if I believe in the coin. I don't like Ethereum because they have a CryptoKitties and all the dApps, decentralized apps, no one uses. You can go on dappradar.com and confirm this. Everything I'm saying is confirmable. And then the other thing is Ethereum is a shitcoin launcher for ICOs, much of which are illegal, and those are failing. And the third thing is Ethereum doesn't even scale, so it's probably overrated. Vitalik's a smart guy. They had many co-founders. It's a little bit centralized. Good luck with it. I'm not an Ethereum fan.
Just as a closing note, I want to punch back and say, like, sure. I like ETH, and I don't want to bet against Vitalik, because I actually think that when you do get DPoS into ETH, you're going to see Especially when you start to see Plasma sidechain, you're going to see transaction performance that's comparable to like Visa. And at that point, like it just becomes a compute network with consensus and trust, right? So to me, like it's worth using, and it'll probably make a lot of money for a lot of people. So, and maybe it won't be ETH, maybe it'll be EOS, who knows? It'll be someone, but like, we need a performance chain, and we're going to get one. So that part is going to happen. It'll just happen. We will have a performance chain.
Just real quick, my opinion, you can do all that on Lightning with Lightning apps someday.
Bitcoin maximalist.
Not quite.
Because so the usual criteria is like what problem you're solving, but when we look at Ethereum, what problem is Ethereum been solving, or even Bitcoin been solving?
Yeah, I think Ethereum is ICO because it's only 7 transactions per second. So you can't actually solve a problem that requires anything that's faster, right? So you need to do things like buy houses, or you need to do things that don't actually happen that fast. And that's where we're at today. That's why I'm talking about it has to go faster. But it will. We'll get fast Ethereum. We'll get fast everything. Just takes time.
Alexander or Britt, any last closing remarks?
Around that question?
Or anything.
I didn't quite understand the question, but I guess if I understood it correctly.
What is ETH good for?
ICOs.
So I think
For ICOs.
Absolutely.
it became almost in a traditional space an underwriter of issuing offerings. So that's primarily how the Ether being used at this point of making all of these ICOs what we see now in the market. So whether the Ether solved any problems of what the world needs, I'm not sure. Because to Terrence's point, none of these products that came out of Ether had a solid foundation and application in the real world. So whether there is a extension of it, whether there is a development of Ether, I'm sure Vitalik is working on something interesting that may have a future application and the real world adoption and use cases. But for now, in its present form, I don't see this as a viable solution.
Sounds like a good thing to discuss over maybe some coffee as we prepare for our happy hour. So with that said, let's give our panelists a round of applause.